Are your D&D battles missing something? A great battlefield can turn an okay fight into a great encounter. Let's talk about how to level yours up today on D&D PowerPoints. Hi, my name is Mark and I like to write adventures. In fact, I've been doing it for 40 years. I also love to make PowerPoint presentations like the one that you're going to see today. Today we're going to talk about leveling up your D&D battlefields, using those background elements to enhance combat and make your game more exciting. The basic D&D encounter has an empty dungeon room problem. It happens in an empty room on a battle map. The background is static. There's nothing really there to interact with. The characters themselves are fighting a monster in an empty room, and because of the mechanics of games like D&D and Pathfinder, the characters just don't move much. They stay in one place. They are penalized for moving with things like opportunity attacks in some systems, and it just doesn't have a lot going on for it visually. It turns into a series of math problems with dice, and every encounter just seems kind of the same. Today I'm going to talk to you about how to level up your rooms. We'll talk about objects and features, elevation, and hazards, both static and active. When I talk about leveling up your rooms, I want to say that rooms can be outside too. They can be wilderness, cities, ships, anywhere combat happens, or something like this town square that's part of Smash, one of the 4 adventures in the adventure I wrote, Cool Nerd Adventures, Strange Tales from Small Towns. So one way to level up your rooms is by using objects and features. When I say objects, I mean an object is anything in the room that can be picked up, and a feature is firmly attached to a surface. So objects could be food on a table, a fire poker in a blazing fire, wine bottles that just are begging to be picked up and smashed over someone's head, or a jar of marbles that are inviting someone to pick them up and scatter them on the floor. Features can be columns that you can hide behind, doors that you can slam in someone's face, curtains that a thief can skulk behind, a slide that your cavalier is just tempted to slide down with his sword drawn, stairs that you can have dramatic sword fights on, or that chandelier that any character is tempted to jump and swing from. Features can also be things that provide difficult terrain, scattered glass on the floor, or an oil slick, or anything that could really add a little bit of extra danger or complication. Even something like snow outdoors that could slow down someone who's not wearing snowshoes. Most D&D adventures are run on some sort of battle mat. There are a few people that still do theater of the mind, and I think sometimes there are combats where that's what I choose to do, but often it's run on a flat map. Your map may be flat, but the terrain doesn't have to be. There's a lot of systems, what we call more legacy systems going back to 3rd edition D&D, where you get a bonus for higher ground. It's usually a small bonus, like +1. And this is not a rule that is in 5th edition D&D, but it can be a ruling because you might decide that for a particular combat, like a fight on the stairs, there's an advantage to being higher. So you can give that combat advantage if you think it's a significant advantage, or maybe just a small +1 or +2 bonus, depending on what you think is appropriate. You're the GM. You can rule what gives someone advantage or not. Elevation definitely gives one side more work to do. If you're the one climbing the stairs or running up the hill, you're going to be working harder than the person that's higher up. So keep that in mind when you're figuring out how combat's going to work with elevation. And elevation creates a sense of danger. Whenever you are up on a balcony or on the edge of a cliff, there's an opportunity for someone to fall. And one of your players might decide that instead of trying to poke the villain with a sword, he wants to push them off the cliff. And many epic adventures end with a bad guy falling to his death off a cliff. Why not lean into that trope? We talked in the last episode about making modules more challenging, and I think that hazards are one of the best ways that you can upshift stat blocks. Without actually changing the stats of the creature, you're making it more challenging by putting them in a hazardous environment. A lot of dangerous battlefields feature in cinematic movies because they just add that extra sense of drama and action. Think about battles in Star Wars on planets like Mustafar that are covered in lava, or battles in a James Bond film where they're fighting, on a plane that's about to go down, or on top of a skyscraper, or in movies like The Avengers, where you have these battles in abandoned factories, and there's all types of dangers there. The great thing about hazards is they can be used as weapons by your villain or by your players if they choose so. Reducing the danger of a hazard or increasing the danger is a player choice. So if the characters are rushing into a burning building and that's a hazard, they can fight the monster that's in there, or they can choose to reduce the fire. This happened recently when I was running one of my adventures, a bread dog, inside a burning bakery, and some of the players were fighting the demonic dog that was the obvious combat antagonist, but some of them decided that they wanted to reduce the danger to themselves by taking some time to put out the fire. So that gave what could have been an encounter against a single monster, which tends to be the victim of the action economy. It gave the other players something to do and made it more interesting. Hazards can be pre-existing danger, so they go into a situation, there's already a hazard there, but there are also spells that often get called battlefield control, where characters can create, or villains can create their own hazard. I'm thinking things like grease or web at lower levels, the spells that open up pits, even things like wall of fire and wall of ice at higher levels, where you're creating a hazard that will be in the advantage of the person casting the spell through magic. I like to divide hazards into static and active hazards. So static hazards complicate the battlefield, but they aren't really seen as like combatants. They're just background, but they're dangerous background, like this map that you see here with a river of lava. Some other examples would include storms, cliffs, running water, campfires. I mean, a campfire is always something that you could push somebody into, and smoke, which can obscure vision and maybe even create coughing, choking. Active hazards are like static hazards, except they behave like a monster. They have a place in the initiative. I usually have an active hazard act on a preset initiative, maybe on initiative count 10 or initiative count 1, depending on when you want it to happen in the action. They take an action each round. That action will have a random element. Maybe a character has to make a saving throw, or you have to roll on a table that you've created for that action, or the action actually makes the hazard actually makes an attack roll against a nearby character. Some examples would be thunderstorms. So you have a thunderstorm going on, and every round you roll for a random character that the thunder strikes against, and they have to make a saving throw to avoid that. You could have wildfires going on, and they can either increase or decrease every round as they gain momentum. You could have mobs that act as a hazard. You're not fighting individuals in the mob. You're not fighting the mob as a monster. They're the background for what's happening. You can even have battlefields as an active hazard. So you're not trying to play out a mass battle, but the battlefield is the background for what the characters are doing. You can even have monsters that are so large and such a high CR that the players aren't meant to fight them, but they are in the background, and maybe the player's objective is to save people from the large kaiju or Godzilla or whatever you want to call it. So one example that I personally created is an adventure that I wrote for a really fun game called Laser Metal. I wrote this back in 2020, back when we were all kind of finding things to do. And this adventure is written in a futuristic world, post-apocalyptic, where the only people that survived the apocalypse were metalheads. And so the game that I wrote is called Too Broke to Rock, and you can see the cover there on the screen. And one of the first events, the characters, who are all, of course, part of a rock band, end up in a situation where people who want to do harm to the owner of the place start a fire. And at the same time, get everybody riled up and a bar fight starts. So every round, the characters roll for initiative, the would-be saboteurs roll for initiative, but also the fire and the bar fight have an initiative count. So there's a table every round that you roll on to see, what the bar fight does to people nearby. And then you roll to see if the fire increases or decreases based on the actions of the players and the non-player characters. So it has two different active hazards going on at the same time. So fun adventure. You can check that out on Drive-Thru RPG if you're interested in playing some laser metal and finding out if your players are too broke to rock. I ran this adventure at PaizoCon Online a couple of years ago called Scions of the Sky Key Part 2 Kawaquari. And I don't remember every detail of the adventure, but I do remember that there was a part in the adventure, and this was a low-level adventure, I think for first or second level characters, where there was a T-Rex. And obviously at second level, the characters weren't meant to fight the T-Rex, but they were competing for resources in this region with another rival group called the Aspis Consortium. And the way the adventure plays out is it's a chase. And what the players have to do is not outrun the T-Rex, but outrun the rival group. And it was a lot of fun because there was this definite sense of danger. And as they were running away, they would do things to impede this other group to make sure that they were the victims of the T-Rex and they were on the menu and not your player characters. And I remember being told by the players at the end of that, even though we did this over Roll20 on an online platform, they said, that was the first time I ever played in a game with a chase scene, and I felt my heart pounding a little bit. And so I felt really accomplished as a game master in creating that through description, even though we were just rolling skill checks and, maybe casting a few spells or doing a few combat attacks here and there. Having that as a background, that active hazard, really made a difference in the action. A battlefield can be another type of active hazard. This book, Heroes of Battle, which was first introduced in the 3.5 edition of D&D, really reimagines battles not as complex math problems or mini wargaming, but as an active hazard, a backdrop by which heroes can do cool stuff to turn the tide of the battle. This idea of the battlefield as an active hazard was carried forward in the Pathfinder adventure path, Giant Slayer, in the first installment of that called the Battle of Blood March Hill. In this second level adventure, characters were swept up into a battle where the town they were in was attacked by a group of orcs led by a giant. And there were just little battles and skirmishes that the characters were part of in the background of this larger battle. And they had to do things like rush into homes and save people that were trapped and, sabotage different resources for the enemy army. And it just became this wonderful way to use a battle that was too big to resolve through any method that was going to be fun for the players, but it definitely had that sense of chaos and urgency that we have to go to the next thing in order to, win the day. And so the characters, by their actions, would accumulate victory points so that the little things that they were doing would affect the outcome of the final battle. So when I was running Giant Slayer, I actually wrote a couple of songs that went with that first book, and two of them are actually featured on my album, Reptiles and Monsters, because I also do music in addition to writing these adventures, if you didn't know that already. So tracks 9 and 10, Blood March and The Other Side, are based on songs that were kind of described in that adventure path. So the Battle of the Blood March was a kind of a war song, and it starts out on the track with some definite war drums and some battle horns, and then I bring in some guitar, and it just sort of builds to a large ending at the end. It's a short track, but if you need something to get you in the mood for a good epic fight, I definitely recommend you checking that out. The Other Side is a ballad. It's a bit softer, and it was really almost like the companion song to Blood March. And it really deals with, what is it like when you're a half-orc and you have sworn allegiance to a small town that is at war with the orcs. And so you kind of find yourself, wanting peace, but thinking about your loyalty that you've sworn to your town, and that putting you in a difficult position. And it's just another one of those songs that starts out kind of soft and it builds kind of to an end. And there's a lot of other fun songs on the album. You can see the cover looks a little more horror inspired because I did a lot of songs about classic Universal horror films like The Mummy and The Wolf Man and The Invisible Man, and Dracula and Frankenstein are in there. And also, we start off with a song called Monster Cereals that's about, Count Chocula and Frankenberry, and then go into a song about Ninja Turtles. So, we have that's why it's called Reptiles and Monsters, is you have these monster songs, and you have Ninja Turtles and snakes. And for some reason, I decided to throw in a cover of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? At the end. It's only available on the CD and the digital download version that actually combines the original 1967 Scooby-Doo theme with the 1971 Scooby-Doo movies theme. It was called the original Scooby-Doo movies, but it was actually a cartoon episode format. But or maybe it was the new Scooby-Doo movies. I don't remember. But so if you grew up in the 80s like me, you'll recognize both of those theme songs because they were heavily played in syndication. So next week, we will continue with D&D PowerPoints. My next D&D PowerPoint is about D&D's random tables. Are they bad or good game design? And how can you make tables or use tables that will enhance your games?
Bread dog. Nothing to do with the bread dog.